Hi, it's Ewan Jones. I'm talking to Elizabeth Hobson, leader of Justice for Men and Boys. There has been some contention recently in the anti-feminist men's rights movement. Some in the movement favour a sexually libertarian viewpoint with regards to gender relations. Other people in the movement favour a more traditional conservative viewpoint when it comes to gender relations. Elizabeth fits into the former group. I fit into the latter. Tonight, we will be discussing our relevant viewpoints to see where we can find common ground and to see where we disagree. So, Elizabeth, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, and all the better for seeing you. It's been a long time and it's always a pleasure. So thank you for
Excellent, good
having
stuff.
me.
That's all good. That's all good. So, shall I just start with you? If you want to sort of sketch out your more sexually libertarian perspective on gender relations and sort of how that fits into a wider context of the men's rights and anti-feminist movement.
Just a small one to start off with then.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, when you messaged me the other day, you suggested that we might talk about monogamy, traditional gender roles, and marriage. And I think
Right,
that
yes.
it would be interesting to kind of pick them apart one by one, actually. So where would you like to start?
Yeah, I think I tried to, I initially came up with that, and then I tried to reduce it down to traditionally conservative viewpoint. But essentially, yeah, what I'm promoting, I'm a Christian, and what I promote within gender relations is a system of monogamy, a system of marriage, and generally, I think that's a pretty good system whereby you can have a local community, it's a local church community or other local community that is able to maintain good gender relations and a high trust society. So that's sort of my perspective. So,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, if you, I mean, you could start with monogamy if you'd like to go, to start with that one.
I mean, it's all very interesting, and I do absolutely take your point. And I think that a traditional system, or at least a traditional setup, I should say, is a good way for a lot of people to live their lives. And where there is faith involved, I think that can be particularly useful for people who want to establish stable, secure relationships. But I just think that there is a little bit of nuance and a little bit of realism missing from your picture. So, you suggest that the men's rights movement should promote marriage, monogamy, and traditional gender roles. I don't think that would necessarily be appropriate. I think that marriage, as it stands, is a big risk for men in particular. And I think there needs to be a whole-scale reform of divorce courts and family law before I personally would advocate for men to pursue marriage. I think as far as monogamy goes, we are, in an evolutionary sense, serially monogamous. Hunter-gatherer societies, they don't mate for life. They mate, raise a child, move on to the next relationship. And I think that's okay, as long as um, family law and our accepted post-separation behaviours are conducive to ensuring that relationships within the family, that children remain loved and secure and with meaningful access to both of their parents. And then as regards traditional gender roles, in a completely free society, I think that a large majority of people would naturally fall into traditional gender roles. And the reason I think that is based on research such as Catherine Hackim's work on preference theory, wherein she found that 4 in 7 men are work-centered and derive the meaning in their life from being productive in work, and only 1 in 7 women are. However, that same research shows that 3 in 7 men are not work-centered. And so, I think that and indeed 1 in 7 women are work-centered. And so I do think that people need to be free to self-actualize and unencumbered by any kind of, certainly any systemic barriers, which, we see today in positive discrimination for women in fields, just across many fields, that's discrimination. They are barriers for men, when you are pushing women forward. And so we need to get rid of all of that. And then we will see, like we see with the gender equality paradox, that men and women do self-select gendered workspaces to a large degree, which is fine. But, the other thing I would say about traditional gender roles is that in William Collins' book, The Empathy Gap, he discovered that family courts are actually not biased against fathers. What they are biased in favor of is the status quo. So if a man plays the role of being the productive ATM of the family prior to separation, and then there's a separation, and then he wants to spend time with his children, judges may well see it that, well, you haven't been involved, you've just been the cash machine beforehand in your family, so that there's no reason for that not to continue. So I think it is actually important to enable and encourage men to take very active roles within the family. And, father involvement, proper, meaningful involvement, is associated with doing better at school, having better self-regulation, having better self-respect, not getting into risky behaviors, not ending up in prison, not committing suicide and being, affected by mental health problems. So, I mean, it sort of depends what you mean, actually, by traditional gender roles, because I've kind of jumped in and not asked you to define it and assumed that what you mean when you say traditional gender roles is a kind of 1950s setup with a man going out and earning money and a woman at home looking after the kids. But actually, you might be going pre-industrial revolution and saying that you want, men and women at home working and getting the kids involved. I don't know, you tell me.
With that one, yeah, I think it varies over the ages based upon the level of technological sophistication of the society. And so that definitely plays into it. And it does seem that, the expectation that we've had in the West for a long time now has been the, I'd say in the UK, it's probably more the terraced house expectation of that you'll live, in the US, it's the suburban house with the white picket fence.
Yeah.
We don't have that much room, so it's more the terraced house with a small back garden and maybe resident permit parking scheme or something around the front, and then the 2.4 children who were born into that, and I'd say, I mean, yeah, until the 60s, the viewpoint was that the woman would stay at home, and she may do a small job to do, to bring in some money, but it was a supportive income, whereas the man was the main breadwinner. And so he'd be going out working full time, making decent money, would be paying for the house and a lot of the the shopping and the other things that the family bought, and then the mother would be spending a lot more time looking after the children, helping to raise them, and she would be part of the local community as well. So that kind of system, and I think I mean, now it's obviously there's probably more population pressure on us, but I think in most first world countries you'd want a system of around that level, whereas
Right.
I think with the feminist movement came along, and it's promoted the feminization of the workplace, and so that's been denigrating men and saying that they should no longer be the top earners, and then trying to put women into these positions. And from there, you're sort of, I think you're seeing a lot of chaos, because I'd say Belinda Brown actually does put some really interesting research on this subject up in, it was one of her recent videos, and I think it was about, I believe it was about fatherlessness. I think it was the first video in that series. And the information she put up was that in a lot of situations, the woman, if she's making a lot of money, and so and the guy is, and the husband is also a high earner, she will then cut down to part-time hours, or will in many cases make a decision of that type, so that she is still the lesser of the two earners, as a way of, I think, allowing him to be the man, and so that she could play the within the workspace more of the complementary gender role. So I mean, I see it, I see it everywhere, and I think obviously there are exceptions, but I think generally that is the pattern that we fit into. And if we go back further through our history, to say the beginning of complex human society, and back even further, the role of the men then was to, say if we were like Australopithecus africanus, I think that they were the first hominid species to scavenge for meat. And so if you were a male Australopithecus africanus, your main two jobs were, if a lion tried to invade the tribe space, you'd be there throwing rocks at it. And, all of the other males from the tribe would do that. And then the females would protect the youngsters. And then also, if you were a male, you'd be expected to go out and to scavenge for meat as well, and bring back some meat to the tribe, and then share it with the females of the tribe. And it seems a reciprocal arrangement emerged, around that point, where you would form relationships off the back of the male bringing a lot of meat back to the tribe. So I think a lot of this, the way we interact, was forged at that point in time, even earlier.
Oh yeah.
It's right there in our in our genetics, and it's a big part of us. So
Oh
yeah.
yeah, I definitely, I would say that those instincts for men to protect and provide are archetypal, not stereotypical. They really, they're hardwired, and we see them across cultures, across time. But I think you could maybe take from that an idea that women are therefore more nurturing and better at raising children. But those men who went out and protected and provided were at the peak of their physical fitness. So younger men would be at camp looking after children. Older men would be at camp looking after children. Women back then had jobs to do around the settlement that were aside from just being with the kids. I mean, so I think that it could be overstated how distinctly gendered those societies were.
Right. Okay. I mean, yeah, I don't want to go too much into that, but I think that there is some crossover, and
and I mean,
there is a lot of separation as well.
Yeah, and with regards to the traditional society with the white picket fences and terraced houses that you outlined, I'm fairly convinced that was a short-lived blip.
Okay.
And not only was it a short-lived blip, but it was a short-lived blip that only applied to middle classes and upper.
Right.
Working class families in the 1950s, everyone worked, not just men and women, the children as well. Everyone had to contribute to surviving. Maybe not children in the 1950s, but
probably a bit earlier, I think, was the heyday.
Yeah, possibly a bit earlier. I mean, they would children, because my family, my mother's mother and her brothers and sisters, the 50s was their kind of time to grow up, and they did contribute in terms of roaming the streets collecting empty glass bottles, to take back to factories to sell, climbing over bomb sites to scavenge old bits of metal to sell, so there was, and obviously they were working class, and they were contributing to the income of the family. And I think but I don't see the idea of men at work, women looking after children as a consistent and widespread norm at any point in history. I think rather what it was that there was, a big post-war push to get women back in the home, because jobs were limited because the economy had been hit by war, and needed the jobs.
I'd say, I mean, with that one, that men have always been expected to work pretty much full-time hours, maybe even more than that. and then for women, there's depending on your class status, that like so women of lesser classes are expected to do more work, and then higher classes,
well, they don't have
you
a
can then
choice.
be a lady of leisure if you're in a higher class, and you
Yeah.
don't have to work then. But really, women had much higher, like the fertility rates were much higher until they started dropping in about the 1870s, and then there was a huge drop after the so there was a baby boom period, and then you have the introduction of safe, effective abortion and contraception in the late 60s, and then fertility rates have been kind of plummeting since then. So and that seems to be a this sort of medical intervention, which has then led to a pretty worrying cultural shift. I think if you consider that the birth rates has to be quite high in order to maintain a stable,
Placements.
expanding population. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was sort of my spiel on that one. I mean,
Yeah.
just sort of the other thing was I don't know, I do think that just my concluding point on this, I think, is that I do think that this way of the two genders interacting with each other is it just works. It's it's something that in the majority of cases that men and women want, and I think the feminist movement, by feminizing all of these industries, has done a lot to poison that, to try and subvert the system where men are, because they're happy, like young men are absolutely would be happy to go out to be a provider for their family. And it seems we've now had the feminization of the workplace, and a lot of men are prohibited from taking on that role. And then I think you're kind of ruining gender relations from there. So yeah, that was my sort of final point on that one.
Yeah, there's a lot I'd like to pick up on. I mean, one thing, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was you said. It was something about men being expected to provide, which I think is clearly very true. And that's a very interesting issue, because I think that I don't think it's right that we do have these expectations on men. Men don't have the same options in practice that women do. And I think that we could work on our cultural messaging to empower men to have more choices, and to empower women, and not just their partners, but their partners' friends, with friends, to respect the man who wants to stay at home with the kids and is good at it, while his wife wants to go and earn, or wants to have, a part-time childcare kind of situation going on, which I think would be really good for a fair minority, a reasonably sizable minority.
Right.
I also think that it is archetypically masculine to want to provide. And so I do think that, even having tinkered with messaging and encouraged men to be involved in their children's lives, we're not going to get 50-50 parity in workplaces. We are going to get more men putting the hours and taking the risks to get, the very intensive jobs that we need doing done, which is fine. you know, which is obviously, that's something that like feminists can't deal with. And, you know, it obviously, it doesn't just come out in there being more CEOs called John than female CEOs. It also comes out in there being, you know, vastly more bin men called any male name you can think of.
Female
bin men.
Bin woman. Not too many of those, but yeah.
You never know these days, though.
I mean, I saw one the other day, for what it's worth, but yeah.
Did you? You saw a bin
did.
woman?
Yes,
a female bin man.
I was jogging along and I saw a bin woman, so yeah.
And fell over. Wow. And then, you know, I would like to pick up, but possibly once I've said a few things, you can explain to me what you mean by promotion, because, you know, you said to me before we had this conversation that the men's human rights movement should promote monogamy, marriage, traditional gender roles. And I think that what do you mean by promote? I think is sure. The critical question for me, because there's promotion and there's promotion. But then, yeah, you know, your other point I wanted to pick up on was the idea of the feminization of the workplace. And, you know, as we've mentioned, there are plenty of spheres wherein men are actively, directly hindered from doing their jobs because women are pushed forwards. However, there's also just this change that's happened in a lot of sectors, and, you know, a lot of it's led by kind of HR departments, wherein even if men are not actively prevented from achieving promotions and doing whatever, they're actively prevented from anything that could be construed as behaving like a man. You know, and anything they do is potentially, if they're interacting with a woman, going to lead to some kind of disciplinary for bullying or disciplinary for sexual harassment.
Yeah,
you know,
so this second problem turns into the first problem eventually.
Yeah, and actually, you know, it's not just that men are being harassed by HR departments. It's also that relationships are being hindered because a lot of people have traditionally found love at the workplace. And how are you supposed to do that when something like, telling someone they smell nice can be construed under UK law as sexual harassment?
Yes,
you know? So, yeah, the feminization of the workplace, I think, is a problem. And I think that, you know, there was some room for bringing a feminine perspective into the workplace. And so, you know, you obviously have experience of working within the mental health sector.
I'm out of it now, but yes, yeah.
And, you know, if you look at asylums in the Victorian age, my God, you know, I think that a little bit of feminine compassion and sympathy and nurturing and, you know, always being strong and proactive and objective, a bit of subjectivity was in order. But as you know, within mental health systems now, there is a complete lack of discipline and order, and it's all subjective, and there is no space for a masculine taking of control type thing when, you know, a mental health ward explodes in chaos.
Mm-hmm.
So
and it's interesting as well, isn't it, with you know, we've had the recent rise of Jordan Peterson, this clinical psychologist from
see my
Canada,
lobster
who
over there.
nice, yeah. And I think part of the reason for his meteoric rise is because we have had yeah, this feminization of the psychology industry, and you know, this idea that everything is about empathy and about listening to, you know, the patient, and you know, about doing person-centered care, and you know, like doing whatever you can for them. And then he comes along, and you know, he's saying to the patient, you know, you need to clean your room, and you need to straighten up your ideas, and you know, don't try to change the world, try to change yourself. And you know, so it's sort of like a cold bucket of water, you know, thrown over a someone who's in this sort of delirium of probably, you know, like say if it's a patient or something, you know, if they start hearing that sort of talk, then yeah, it is a very sharp bringing them back to reality. And I think the with yeah, the feminization of psychology industry, you know, it's all been very nicey to the patient, and you know, and that's yeah, I mean, within the mental health industry, you've seen the rise of a lot of patients who are just quite degenerate, just because they don't have that they haven't had that injection of reality, and it's
Yeah.
not done them any good, you know.
Yeah, and you know, when you think about it, um, fatherlessness is a significant predictor of descent into mental health issues. And so, you know, I would think it would be quite logical to think, okay, this person has grown up dad deprived, you know, gone through an education system, if they're young, that is devoid of men to a great extent, and now they found themselves within the mental health system. Perhaps what they need is some masculinity.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I think yeah, we're seeing eye to eye on that one. Can we get on to marriage and monogamy? Because I think that's the probably the bulk of the talk. And I mean, you laid out a point earlier on that within the anti-feminist and men's rights movement, you wouldn't want to promote to young men the notion that they should get married, because of the corruption of the marriage system by, you know, the feminist family courts, and generally their incursions into the law system and their control of marriage, and all of this. And yeah, I mean, I agree with that, and you know, I think that there's a it's been it's an awful corruption. And I absolutely have sympathy with any young man, you know, who is seeing this marriage game, and is thinking, yeah, it's something I kind of would like to avoid, actually, just because the system is so stacked against me that you know, if I marry, then like she's just hugely incentivized. The wife is hugely incentivized to divorce him, to, you know, then say that maybe, you know, he raped her, or was sexually abusive towards her, or, you know, physically abusive towards her, and then he can be thrown out of the house, and then she'll get everything, and he'll just be reduced to the status of the ATM machine, which I think is disgusting. And it's really sad to see, because this institution, I think, is what has propped up certainly Western society, if not every society, right from the first complex society systems that we had. And obviously at points there were, there were systems where there was a higher level of polygyny. That's where you have one man with many wives. But those systems were...
Isn't that polygamy? And isn't
Oh, no,
polygyny?
polygamy is... Sorry.
Because I know there's one where you have, it's wives who have more than one husband, and there's two different terms and they're slightly different. Sorry, I'm probably just...
I don't know what the one is for wives who have more than one husband. I'd say that's less common.
It is less common, but it was... where did it feature? It was somewhere like Mongolia or somewhere like that, when the situation was that the land was so incredibly difficult to get anything out of, that a family needed more than one man to feed themselves.
Right, yeah. Oh yeah, it sounds interesting, but okay, fair enough. So the
interesting aside.
So I mean, with like,
but just to be clear, I do advocate for that system.
What the many wives and then one husband?
No, the many husbands.
Okay. I see. Okay, yeah. So I mean, yeah. So basically, with the polygyny system, one man and many wives, or one wife and many concubines. And this was something that was promoted by Greek mythology and their patriarch supreme, Zeus, who had his wife Hera, but then also the like a massive list of women and other gods or goddesses who he seduced, and had many illegitimate children with all of these other women and goddesses. That's what we see in a lot of the old societal systems. But there was a lot of violence, I think, that was associated with the old polygynous system. And but basically what happens is that I don't think within that system, it depends on the amount of money the patriarch has. In some cases, he may have some money to spend, and so the children can be raised fairly well. But I'd say spiritually, they're not being raised well, and they are being raised in quite a narcissistic environment. Also, when the patriarch, when there's not a lot of money, often you say that the boys and the girls, especially if they're illegitimate, that the boys will end up being warriors and the girls will end up being prostitutes. And so what you're seeing there is it's a system where there's not that much paternal care and maternal care for the children. And I think there's far better paternal and maternal care for the children within a monogamous system where it's one man and one woman. And I'd say also the communities that are created within a monogamous system are a lot tighter, and the bonds that exist between all of the adults within that community are better. Whereas in a polygynous system, you've got the patriarch and his harem of wives, and then on the outside of that, you have a lot of angry men looking in, and so there's quite a lot of chaos that's inherent within that system. And so then we see the Judaism and the rise of Christianity as the two main Abrahamic religions, and they both promote monogamy within marriage. And so that's a system of one man, one woman. They get married and they have children then, and they try to raise the children as best as they're able to. And I think spiritually that's the best system for the children, and also for the parents, and for the community, and then for the society as a whole. So I just get your take on that one.
Yeah, before I give my take, I did look it up. It's polyandry when I have more than one husband.
Okay, cool.
Not me.
Right,
But
right.
yeah, I think there is a little nuanced difference between what you're describing, which I can appreciate is a kind of ideal scenario, and reality. And so we know from DNA tests in the present day, and also DNA tests that have shown the historic trend, that regardless of whether people are in monogamous situations, a much smaller proportion of men reproduce than women. And I think that we should have paternity testing as standard, because I think that there is a significant moral wrong that is done when we as a society allow men to raise children believing that they are their own when they're not. And you know, the other sort of reality little jolt that I'd like to give is actually from Eric Anderson's book, The Monogamy Gap. And so his research, it was only on men for that book, unfortunately, because I'd be really interested to have seen the results for women. But you know, what he found was that people had ideals about being monogamous, but there's a massive proportion of people who cheat.
Right.
And his argument is that the reason people cheat is because they value their partner. I know it's kind of counterintuitive, but you know, he says, well, look, if they didn't care about their partner, they wouldn't bother cheating. They'd just go, you get out of the way, I'm going to sleep with X, Y, or Z person, you know. And so they cheat to protect their partner from the pain of knowing that they are having some kind of intimacy with someone else. And I think that perhaps Eric might be right when he suggests that a little more honesty could be useful if we were more accepting of the fact that some people need variety in their sex lives, and we could just have honest discussions about that. And you know, it's going to be different for everybody, and monogamy is different for everybody. Like for some people, their partner watching porn would be abusing the monogamous relationship that they've established. You know, for other people it would have to be actually having sexual intercourse with someone. For some people, sexual intercourse with someone outside the relationship is okay, but it's about an emotional connection, you know, that it is crossing the boundary. And I do think that monogamy is the best. A monogamous relationship is, as standard, the best place to raise children for, you know, stability and, you know, parental involvement and all of those kinds of things. But I think that other setups can work, and I think that they should be respected. I think, you know, when you talk about promotion, I think that we should just, I would be, you know, agreeable to the idea of promotion in that we look at the evidence for what is a good way to raise children. I would say that, you know, we should promote monogamous long-term relationships, especially for parents, by taking away perverse incentives, possibly by providing financial incentives like tax breaks to couples who make what are statistically sensible decisions for their families, you know, like marriage. But yeah, I would just be slightly wary of generalizing too much, and I wouldn't want to go back, you know, I mean, like, if you look at the 1950s, what I fail to see is entire populations in happy marriages being very satisfied with their gender roles. I think that there were a lot of unhappy people.
Yeah, and I can't say there's like no problems in that system, you know. I think that's obviously, like, whatever system I'd say you've got, then, you know, you're going to have problems. So, you know, I think that equally applies to then as to other systems as well. I do. What was you raised the first point was the I possibly should have taken it down. It was that I was trying to remember this, that so that there was the one that people cheat, and the first one.
And the other one was the difference between the likelihood of men and women to reproduce.
Okay. Oh yes, yeah. Right. Okay. So with that one, I mean, what we see is that after the so initially through our, you know, hunter-gatherer past, I believe, is it it's I'm not sure if it's around 2-1 for most of that period. I believe so.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Okay.
I thought it was more in favor of women, but it could be 2-1.
Yeah.
Let's take that.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think, you know, that does happen, and there is like within that natural system, there is serial monogamy, and the you know, woman will gravitate towards the alpha males of the tribe, and the alpha males will gravitate to the most fertile women, and so you know, that there is pair bonding between other couples within the tribe, but also there is that you know, gravitating of the alpha males and the most fertile women towards each other, and I think that accounts for a lot of that. And then after the rise of complex human society, we then see a really high level of polygyny, and I think at one point, generally across the world, it goes up to 17-1. So 17 women are reproducing for every one male. And so, you know, I guess this is the time of all of the you know, you've got the various religious systems that honor gods like Zeus, you know, and other figures of I think Gilgamesh is a I forget the name of the I did, yeah, okay,
Must be like
ignore that bit.
Mesopotamian or something.
Yeah, exactly. But so it's a lot of the gods are, you know, the ones who are the ultimate alpha males are the ones who are promoted. But then I think we then see that system is quite violent, and it doesn't lead to great outcomes for a lot of children who are growing up. And there's obviously a lot of slavery and a ton of illegitimate children, and you know, they're not so well looked after. They're not looked
Well,
after
yeah, I
within
think
the family.
I would probably advise some caution on um, attributing all of the problems within those societies to their relationship kind of structures.
I think
You
it's
know,
very
I
important.
accept
It's
that
not
there can be
all of the
fallout,
problems, but yeah.
and you know, I accept the idea that I think you're kind of referencing that fatherhood promotes what you might call positive masculinity, you know, whereas disenfranchisement, not being able to bond and have relationships can lead to dysfunction.
Yeah, I'm promoting. I think I sort of said it before. I think the religion of you know, the Jewish religion and the Christian religion came along with a better philosophy for how to manage the family and for how to manage the local community, and then you're seeding, you know, the entire society from there. And so I think this reaches its peak with the letters of Paul in the New Testament, and he is promoting. You know, he sort of says that there shouldn't be any sexual immorality. You know, with like at all, and it's, you know, it's okay for the man and the woman to have sexual relations within the marriage, but then outside of it, it's unacceptable. And you know, and that's basically where you get to with that. And so I think that system then did help to seed all of the countries of Europe. They were all Christian countries, going, you know, from the end of the Roman Empire until fairly recently, when a lot of them have you know, now they've become more atheist societies. And I think a lot have turned their back on religion. And but for that entire period, there was a strong focus on marriage and on marriage for life, and on, you know, the parents would look after their children and would ensure that they grow up well, and that they grow up to become strong and healthy adults. And I think that task is it's far easier to achieve that within a loving marriage. And I'd say that, you know, feminism and liberal society recently has since the 60s, basically, it's when, you know, its fangs came out, and it really started to mess around with the culture. And it's promoted a far more liberal dating system, saying that you know, it's fine to have sex outside of marriage. And I think, you know, that has just been the system that's been promoted. And then within the marriage, you know, there's more of an ethos of well, you can cheat if you want, and you know, that's fine, you know. And then, like, just divorce after a few years, and, you know, just cast him aside, and you know, just move on to your next partner, and you know, take the kids and throw them out the house as well if you want. So I think it's become really liberal, and there's really lax, and anything goes. And you know, if you take the Christian interpretation of all of this, then it would all be, it's all a hideous sin. And you know, for doing this, a lot of these women are going to burn in hell for what they've done. And you know, so it's far more I guess, you know, a far more dogmatic system. But I think that there's a that there's certainly, I figure there is advantage to that, because the advantage is that if you have a system with tighter boundaries and structures in place, then, you know, people stick to those boundaries and they're able to get on better with each other. And so you then have a more stable society from there. Whereas if it's anything goes, then anyone can just do whatever they want whenever they want, and nothing is holding the society together, and so it then just collapses at some point. And I think that that is happening now. Yeah, I think, you know, that there are problems with the whole paternity issue, and that has become more of an issue that people know more about ever since the invention of the paternity test. I guess in the past we didn't have those, so you didn't know, and unless the baby had a fairly different complexion to you, then, you know, probably in a lot of situations there, like the woman would be able to get away with it. And I guess that's just something from the past that it is kind of neither here nor there, because it's like, you know, at the time, I'm not sure if you know, everyone was none the wiser, then yeah, I suppose you just get on with it, isn't it? And I think in some situations, you probably have the woman who gets pregnant with another man and then has his child, but then around the same time she sees that he is wants absolutely nothing to do with her, and so she then shucks up with a different man, and he is cuckolded in that he is raising the first of her children. But then, I don't know, within that system, maybe you have more of an ethos of he then has some of his children with her. So I mean, I figure that probably was more the case in a you know, a structured Christian system, and I figure that did happen in the past as well. Yeah, so I'll leave it with you, because that's probably quite a bit of content for you to look into. So yeah, there we go.
Yeah. I mean, you know, as an atheist, it's not entirely clear to me that our collective loss of faith has been a net gain. And I am absolutely willing to accept your thesis that that it hasn't been a net gain in terms of our relationships with each other and families. But what I would suggest is that, as far as I can see, the toothpaste is out of the tube. And, you know, widespread kind of entire society, the idea of our entire society converting back to Christianity is about as likely as our entire society converting back to like the ancient Greek kind of gods, to be honest. And so where does that leave us? And I think where that leaves us is that we have problems, you know. I mean, for a start, human beings, I believe, are homo religiosus, and we have a religious instinct. And if you take away organized religion, it's redirected that instinct into other avenues, and it might be like football or rock music, both of which are kind of fine, but it might also be radical politics.
Yeah, the woke religion.
Yeah, problem. But you know, I think we can.
Saint Greta, I guess, isn't it? You know, the savior of the woke religion,
I was saying
Greta
Greta.
Thunberg.
Sorry,
Yeah,
when
yeah.
when you say Greta, I think of Greta Aurora and not
Oh,
what's
she's much nicer. Yeah.
um but yeah, I think that through honest conversations and philosophy and reason, we can, and not just reason but also stories, honest conversation about people's experiences, because a lot of people don't respond to reason, especially women. They respond to stories. I think it's the only chance we have. I don't know if it's possible, but and it's things like, I mean, you mentioned at some point the idea that perhaps people should be having sex within marriage rather than whenever they want. And I disagree. I think it is fine to have sex with whoever you want, wherever you want. However, what surveys show is that a lot of women in particular feel violated and degraded after casual sexual encounters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not all women by any means, but nobody talks about that. We kind of push women through our popular culture to be sexually liberated without proper reference to the fact that that's not in many, it's not in a lot of women's natures to do that, and they may well suffer as a result of doing that.
Okay. So what was your, like, initially you had, there was this thought about the religious system, that you didn't see us going back to Christianity or a belief in, I guess, the Dagda, or or the ancient Greek gods. And equally, you see there being a problem that so with the all of the, I guess, the new woke religion, and these other, I suppose, pseudo religious systems, like sports and probably pop culture as well. So we do, you were sort of saying that we do have this religious impulse in us, but I guess you see it as being quite fractured now in the 21st century, and there's no clear direction that we'll be going.
Correct. And what we need is to have really some kind of philosophy or ideal that people can circle around, in the way that people circle around ideas of that come from faith, that come from organized religion, that can unite and bind our nations together. And there are contenders. There is like the capitalism,
Okay.
Has been really positive, and I think that were we educated properly, then we could, almost all of us circle and gravitate around the idea that, capitalism has been a great liberator of our societies, and this is the way we live. And, nationhood and the diversity that exists when nations are autonomous and sovereign, I think that could be a really positive idea to circle around, patriotism for your homeland. But obviously we have a massively, radically left-wing education system that isn't telling people about this.
I mean, they like I sort of mentioned with the woke religion, they do seem to have these ridiculous heroes that develop within that, who, as far as I can tell, promotes these completely disgusting narratives. So I mean, a recent one that has come to attention is George Floyd, the patron saint of Black Lives Matter, who I mean, it seems to be this really horrible degenerate character who was massively high on methamphetamine when the police came to arrest him, and then there was a a sort of very nasty incident following that, but then they're trying to turn him into a hero, and it's like, yes, it's not working. I've watched a lot of films and seen a lot of stories, and this guy is not a hero. He's not really impressing anyone. Or Saint Greta, Greta Thunberg, and her big heroic action was going to this UN climate panel and telling all of these US senators and so on, you have stolen my dreams, and how dare you? I do feel that there's there is that need to have an actual I'd say it's a meta hero, a messiah who we all look towards, that helps bind the community, and it helps bring people together, and so they all talk about the same meta hero, the same messiah, and it's a form of inspiration for everyone. And I mean, with Jesus in particular, they the kind of underlying belief for I'd say for real Christians, for true believers, is that everyone is a sinner, and that everyone, they goodness doesn't exist within ourselves. It's something we can do, but it's not an inherent part of us. We are sinners, and we'll just do terrible, horrendous things throughout our lives. But it's only by reaching towards Jesus, who is the source of goodness, the source of all goodness in the universe. That is the only way that we can do well, that we can do well individually, but also that brings us together as a community. And so the whole community can do well. And I think there's something special about that, that particular idea, which I don't think exists in a lot of the other religious systems. If you take the Norse religious system, Thor is a great warrior, and if you want to be like Thor and get to Valhalla, where you'll be feasting at his table with him and Odin, then you have to do well on the battlefield and act with bravery and courage, and decapitate lots of people, and then die on the battlefield as well, which is the most glorious part of all. So yeah.
I mean, which was functional at that period of time in that place. In the same way that Christianity, I mean, my understanding is that it actually did gain a lot of support within men, probably for the reasons you discussed earlier, which is that under more paganistic the societies in that area at the time, they were not necessarily likely to find someone to produce with, whereas under Christianity and that system, they were very likely to, because it was the pair bonding monogamous relationship model. But you know, what, on the other hand, the sort of pantheon religions have is greater psychological kind of diversity, and there's kind of, you know, they provide
The Greek one especially,
archetypes.
I'd say.
Yeah, they provide archetypes for how, you know, we can recognize within real people, which I think is incredibly interesting, if nothing else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so, and I do feel that yeah, we are seeing this you know, the woke religion now, and it's you know, it's a kind of the one that's promoted to us through the TV and you know, through a lot of classrooms and so on, and you know, I sort of think that yeah, but basically, you know, the old religious systems, certainly the one that served the people of Europe really well for the last 2,000 years, has a lot more depth than this the new woke religion.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah. Oh God, I mean, it's
yeah,
so much more functional. It just, that there's no comparison, um, you know. But I'm just not convinced that a large enough proportion of society is willing or able to take the God pill
yeah,
and
yeah,
um,
yeah.
have access to, you know, how useful that is. Um, I think it would be nice if we could, as a society, at least, you know, go back just pushing 30 years ago when I was at school.
Mm-hmm.
We learned a lot about Christianity, and
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't believe then, and actually I resented those lessons. But with hindsight, I do think that I have got a lot of value out of those stories. And
Mm-hmm.
with hindsight, I can see how a lot of the basis of our liberal societies and how, you know, the reason we've flourished is down to those stories. And also, I have access to references throughout literature and art, and rhetoric, that I wouldn't have if I didn't know those stories. And now, you know, my children, if it wasn't for me, would know virtually nothing about Christianity. They'd know like the Christmas story, and that would be about it.
Sure, yeah.
They learn other things in religious education now. And I think that
So they
is,
don't learn about Christianity, they just learn about other religions.
yeah.
Okay. There we are. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I
And I
was just
think
going
that
to,
that's a
yeah,
great disservice. That's a great disservice to
yeah, yeah.
you know, our forefathers and our future.
Okay, I do think there has been something lost within the, you know, the new liberal society, and I'd say the main thing that's been lost is the local community.
Mm,
And so I do think that so, you know, you have the institution of, you know, for last 2,000 years, the institution of marriage and monogamy, and but that is all within the bounds of the local community. And so it's you know, it's a group of people who are led by, say, the church father or the pastor, and that's the congregation, and they try to make sure that everyone within the congregation is doing okay, is doing well, and you know, so it's a more of a system of just looking after other people, and the strong members trying to do what they can to help the weaker members, and you know, the more successful ones trying to, say, help say a less successful one with you know, a job or something like that. And I see it, I'm seeing that really clearly now that I've sort of joined, I've become a Christian, and compared to before, I did feel before in my life that it was this system, the liberal system, and there was just a bunch of cliques, and it was especially I guess where when it came to probably when it came to school and university and stuff, that you're trying to get into certain cliques, and you're trying to be one of this group, and you're trying to get into that group, and all of that sort of thing. Whereas I think with religion especially, what's great about it is that there's an instant statement, which is that certainly within Christianity, anyone who wants to be saved can come along, can join us. And although I'd say that's not there to the same extent in other religions, which are more ethnicity based, or more race based and so on, but it certainly exists in Christianity. And I mean, actually, that's a really strong part of Islam as well, is that anyone who wants to join can do. And so you then you have all of the local communities around the land, and anyone who wants to go along to receive help and to receive blessing and to be part of the local community can do so. And I mean, I think it's quite hard to have an atheist system that does that, because the bit that ties everyone together within the religious system is the belief in the meta-hero, in that particular Messiah, because that's like all the conversation is kind of geared towards them as the one who you're reaching towards. And I think it's quite hard to replicate that in atheist society. Although I would like to see an attempt at creating some sort of maybe I don't know, Jordan Peterson style institution that actually that actually looks at the topics of meta heroes, generally all of the meta heroes, that sort of thing, and also that understands community. Because I think that in terms of our the history of our species, so we are a monogamous species, but also we form into groups. And when we were Homo sapien hunter-gatherers, it was groups of around 150 members, and that's still the group size that we're most comfortable with today. Okay, so there was I think there's a difference of opinion that we have also about the subject of pornography as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's been a harmful, this has been harmful in my own life. And I think it's harmful to a lot of men and to women as well. And I think the problem with it is that there's a number of basically you sort of so you're it's different to trying to form an actual relationship with someone else. And so there's a problem there, because it hijacks those centers of the brain, and that can then cause problems with trying to form actual relationships. And I think that that's been an issue in my own life, and I think that is quite a significant issue around in lots of different places. And just otherwise, I think there's like if you go onto porn sites, there's lots of attractive women, there's lots of novelty, and I don't think it's all that good to be given this free bonanza of sluts to young men, for them to click onto these porn sites and to go and watch lots of videos. And I think when guys go to all of these porn sites, then it can just be really damaging for them. And I think if you're talking about trying to heal gender relations, trying to have positive gender relations, then yeah, pornography is I think it's a bit of a major issue. It's not the only sexual sin. There's many others as well, but I think it's probably the major one in the world today. It's incredibly ubiquitous. Like huge swathes of the population are just go into these porn sites regularly. So some people like it's every day, and then other people it's like a few times a month. So yeah, I'd like to get your take on that one as well.
Yeah, so I wouldn't dismiss the idea that pornography can be harmful or challenging, can present challenges to individuals, and the idea that it can kind of fulfill the basic kind of sexual instincts and prevent men or women, I suppose, from having that impulse to feed a desire to form a more meaningful relationship, is something that have heard a few people relate as part of their personal stories. And, I can see that happens, but my kind of understanding of that is that everyone that I've ever heard talk about it, almost, it's been a phase. And I recall seeing a debate about video games, and there was this young man saying, oh my God, when I was like a teenager, I would just spend all day gaming and I couldn't do anything else. And I'm so glad that now I've, eschewed video games because I can get on with my life. And one of the other panelists said, well done, you grew up. And I think there's a similar thing that happens with pornography. I think that I think pornography being ubiquitous in society for adults to access is a net gain. And I say that based on research that Jerry Barnett explores in Porn Panic, where he found that if you compare the United States, that's a really useful comparison ground, because what you have is different states at the same time with different rules and regulations, and also, individual states with different rules and regulations at different times. And what he found was that the more easily available pornography was for adults, the lower the rates of rape and sexual assault were. And I think, we can both agree that that is a positive thing. And, the other way in which I think it's a net gain is that, you mentioned novelty, and men in particular do have an evolutionary drive to seek novelty, and pornography presents a fairly safe way of exploring that side of your sexual drive, without actually exposing yourself to having real life sex with strings and strings of people. You can imagine it with visual assistance online. And I think it can be good for individuals in that way, but also good for couples to explore novelty and, the boundaries that they're comfortable with, in terms of kind of pushing their what's the word, not misogynistic, they're what's the word for a relationship between two people?
So I guess what their fantasies, their
No, exploring the, it's, you know, an exclusive relationship between two people is, my mind's just gone.
mutual. I'm not getting this word.
What was that?
Mutual.
No, not mutual.
Uh-huh.
It's your, when you hear it, you'll be like, how did you forget that word? Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue.
Have some tea.
Exactly.
There we are.
No, it's gone. It's gone.
Okay.
But yeah, no, exploring, you know, pushing the boundaries of what
Mm-hmm.
exclusivity kind of means to them, you know,
Right.
without actually inviting other people into their bedroom.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So there was a number of things that a number of points you made there. So I think with the
Monogamy. Monogamous. It was monogamous.
monogamous relation, fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean with the Jerry Barnett this idea, so in terms of there being, I don't think you can prove that there's a direct link between.
No, it's a correlation. Yeah.
I don't believe that.
What,
I
you don't
mean,
believe there's a correlation or the direct link?
I don't believe there's a correlation between porn access and sexual violence going down.
Well, it's quite detailed. There is a correlation.
Yeah, I guess I see in, you know, certain traditional societies, see low levels of sexual violence, and then I see it at higher rates where there's higher levels of drug and alcohol use and other negative social factors. And I mean, you know,
Well,
it
I
depends
mean,
on culture itself.
that's a conflation. That's a conflation of traditional values and areas
Hmm.
where there is widespread like drug use and I can't remember what else you said, but you know, substance
Um,
abuse, those kinds of things, and
yeah,
violence. Um,
yeah.
mm,
But you know, equally with this point here that because you know, I see that there's various you know, religious groups and so on where there's extremely low levels of crime generally. I take the Amish for instance, incredibly low levels of crime, like zero pornography use, and extremely low levels of domestic violence as well.
right.
And you know,
Okay.
I
Yeah,
see
yeah,
this in a lot of
but
other groups as well.
to suggest that there is a causal link between the lack of pornography and, you know, the
I don't think that either.
okay, well, I won't argue against it in that case.
I just I'm doubting the, you know, this idea that there's a like if you take away or if you have more porn, then less people or less men will engage in sexual violence or rape. I think there's you know, you're looking at the entire life cycle for that man that leads to that point, and you know, all of the influences that he has growing up, and you know, the society he's involved in, you know, whether that type of behavior is promoted, or in terms of, you know, some sociopathic societies where it is, you know, and in others where that type of behavior is absolutely, you know, condemned. And I mean, yeah, there's also the, you know, the drug and alcohol use issues as well, and other negative social factors that can influence that. And then, yeah, I think also that sexual violence has gone down over time as well. So, you know, and like in the past, it was more common, and it's less common now generally, along with other types of violence. So,
Yes,
there's
yes,
a lot to
true.
it, yeah. The other point was, I'm trying to remember the first point you made as well. That was I should start
Oh,
writing it down.
it was that people go through phases
Yeah,
of
yeah,
having,
yeah.
you know, of using pornography to excess, and it
Mm,
might
hmm.
either disturb them or, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
possibly even cause them some problems in their lives.
Uh-huh.
But I think that generally people grow out of it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to. I don't have the statistics to hand on you know, numbers of users of it, but I think that it's generally it has become more of a problem in society recently, ever since the arrival of fast internet broadband and the easy availability of all of these porn sites, where you
Mm.
know it's like a few clicks away, and
Yeah,
there's, you know, like anything that you could, any material that you want is available there. And
within reason.
yeah, and so I think it was you know, this is a bit different to, I'd say, you know, the 1990s, where you would have to go through like the ordeal of going into a shop and then buying one of the magazines from the top level, or you know, other kind of hideous activities, like maybe going to a one of those theaters where they have these films showing, that sort of thing, or going to a sex shop as well, you know, with its kind of mirror windows on the outside. And so when you have, when it's like that, it's you know, it has more of a seedy air about it, but
Yeah.
with the internet now, it's just so
Oh
easily
yeah, yeah. I would
accessible. And
absolutely agree. You know, of
yeah.
course, pornography consumption has exploded across demographics, I'm sure. Um, but whether that's a problem is the question.
Mm, mm.
And I'm really unconvinced that it is. You know,
Right.
the fact that more people are viewing it as part of their
Hmm.
leisure activities
Yeah, yeah.
doesn't disturb me particularly. I think, you know, there is a sort of devaluation of sex, which is a shame. But I I think that that is not a symptom of the sort of sexual marketplace. I think actually that might have something to do with the Abrahamic religions.
Mm,
You know,
mm.
I've been reading about Lilith recently, and there was some discussion about. I'm just wondering if it'd be easy to find. I know the paper I'm looking for, the paper I'm talking about is just over there. It's by Daphne Patai.
Okay.
But she discusses the idea, and it's a old Judaic idea. It may be Kabbalistic or something like that. I can't quite remember, but in short, to paraphrase, it was like if a man enjoys sex with his wife, or indeed she enjoys sex with him, Lilith will come and steal his seed and use it to conceive demons. And
Okay.
so it's like, I think that if you go from the sort of pantheistic religions, like, you know, the Greek gods, there was a real sanctity around sex and an idea that, you know, when you enjoyed that union, you were serving, you know, Aphrodite. Whereas, you know, then the sort of Abrahamic religions came in and said, no, it's a base act and it shouldn't be enjoyed. It should be used for procreation and that's it. And I think possibly the sort of devaluation of sex that we do see in pornography, you know, there's nothing magical or mystical about it, is actually possibly a kind of follow-on from that idea. And it's also about, so we've come out of a period of kind of sexual repression, and so the pendulum has naturally swung sort of very dramatically into this kind of reckless, like, abandonment. And, you know, I do think that there is space for us to try to re-sanctify sex, and to, you know, because the truth is that sex is better with someone who you love and trust. And, you know, who you have been with for many years and knows you very intimately on emotional and physical levels. And, you know, that would be useful to, I think, to a lot of people to capture.
Yeah. I mean, so firstly, I'm not too familiar with Lilith.
Well, she is believed to have been, there are stories, very old stories, about her being Adam's first wife, as in Adam and Eve in Genesis.
Oh, okay. So
And
what is? I mean, what are the sources for this?
oh well, shall I get my paper? They're old Jewish. Is it Hasidic texts or something like that, where it's not the Bible proper, but it's religious texts.
Right. Okay. So it's sort of other texts from around that period,
Yes.
like from around the period when the Torah was written, and
Yeah. Should I
and
grab
so
my
what?
paper
There's
so I can talk more
yeah. Go for it. Yeah.
definitively? Right. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's a very old kind of myth, Lilith, and sort of Lilith and very similar kind of personas have appeared. So there was something Sumerian here, in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Right. Syrian, Babylonian, Kabbalistic Judaism. There is a brief, possible, but possibly doubtful mention in the Bible, in Isaiah, where it's written that the wild cat shall meet with the jackals, and the satyr shall cry to his fellow. Yea, Lilith shall repose there and find her a place of rest.
Okay, yeah.
But the kind of myth is, oh, the Talmudic Lilith. So in the Talmud, which is like, you know, old Judaic text.
Sure, yeah.
Mention her, but yeah, the sort of basic myth is that God created Adam and Lilith in his own image from dust, and Lilith sort of bore him a child, or Adam a child, and then Adam wanted to do it again. And she refused to lay beneath him because she said, no, I'm an equal. And then she ran off into the desert to be free, and 3 angels followed her and tried to entreat her to come back, and she refused because she was she liked her lifestyle, living with these lascivious demons as she was, and so they said, okay, well, every day 100 of your demon children will be killed. And she said, okay, well, every day 100 of, 100 human children, I will kill 100 human children. And so they made a deal that if the children bore amulets with the names of the 3 angels on, she would leave them unharmed. But like right up until the 19th century, Jewish children wore these amulets, and they, sort of Jewish husbands and wives did all kinds of ritualistic things to ward her off.
Right, yeah.
There was mention in this paper here that one of the rituals that was observed was that after having sex, a man and his wife would have to cover their heads for an hour, or she'd like find them. And there's another mention. So Lilith, what she would do, they believed, was she would play with infants during the day, then strangle them at night, and then when they died, she would get into their soul and she would have their soul. And so if a child laughed or smiled for no apparent reason during the day, it was common for their parents to smack them on the nose and say, out, Lilith, out, apparently.
Okay, yeah.
And I can't remember why I got onto this subject. I just suddenly became interested.
No, it's quite interesting. I've heard the name before, and I think I do, yeah, just in general mythology talk, but I wasn't too familiar with the character of Lilith. And so yeah, I mean, it seems to be a sort of devouring mother, spurned woman, like kind
there
of
is there's a feminist
element of
website named
sexual hedonism
after
to it. And yeah.
her.
What was that? Sorry.
I said there's a feminist website named after her.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it couldn't be more apt, but it's so disturbing because, feminists generally tend to concentrate on the aspect of her being a liberated woman and not being willing to subordinate herself to Adam. But, in practice, what she meant to people, for a long, long time was the killing of children. And I mean, it's completely apt for feminists, I guess, but it's just so bizarre that
there's a connection there between sexual hedonism and a lack of children or the killing of children. Because you have that the atmosphere of sexual hedonism, say, within the society, and then I mean, if you're looking at the ancient societies, then a lot of the time, say a woman like would become pregnant from the hedonistic activity, the debauched party, that sort of thing, and then afterwards, what's the solution after that is the so-called noble lords who bedded a number of women going to look after any of them. No. So what she ends up having to do is then killing the children, infanticide, and that was really common in the ancient world.
It
So
was.
I think that there's you're kind of looking at the consequence of sexual lust in that society, and obviously, I mean, we're a bit more removed from that now, but I think
but hardly. I mean, we're still killing children. Just because we kill them in utero doesn't make it significantly better, in my estimation.
We've got a number of strategies we use now. There's contraception, which is kind of the initial defense, and then I think the abortion industry as well on top of that, and I think it's absolutely horrific, the number of abortions we're seeing, and especially when like they had that ruling, wasn't it, in the I think it was in the UK in the 1980s, and I forget the name of it, but it was basically that a young teenage girl can just go to her GP and then ask for an abortion, and the parents don't have to know anything about it, and she can make the decision herself. And and then
a friend of mine did it, and I caught up with her sort of years later, and I asked her what kind of aftercare she got. She was like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Well, did you get counselling or something?" And she's like, "No." And she went to the GP, requested an abortion, was granted an abortion, had an abortion, and that was it. And I was just like astounded.
So I mean, I guess from what you've said, we're still seeing a society that promotes a lot of this, sexually promiscuous behavior, and for instance, in that situation, it's in amongst teenage girls as well, and there are consequences to it, and so I think the ancient texts understood this.
The sort of young people are having less sex than they used to, and perhaps that's because of pornography. And I mean, I'm talking pre-COVID here. Everyone's having a lot less sex, I'm sure now, but just as a societal trend before we were all locked in our houses. Young people were having less sex and drinking less as well.
So, I mean, again, like a number of, I'd say that there's going to be quite a few prevailing factors going into that one. Probably pornography, I think, because I think with guys, I think it's especially teenage boys. I think it's causing a lot of developmental problems there, and they're not really. It's also I mean it's kind of making them probably less interested in talking to girls, in trying to attract girls, because they've just got computer games and pornography. And then feminism as well is...
When you have that as an option, that's an option. And then you have our feminized society where it's like, if you ask the wrong girl out, you're going to have a sexual harassment charge levied against you, or at least some significant social shame. It's like, what would you do? So, and we can't wish this kind of dominant feminist culture away. So what should young men do? They want to visit Pornhub, you know, I think that's all
Yeah.
right.
Okay, right. So I think that I mean, yeah, generally, I'd say that the New Testament is pretty good on this.
Mm,
Christianity is pretty good on providing an underlying structure for the people, you know, for the entire population that really works as a way of trying to promote their own salvation, and also that helps to establish the community, and that helps to establish couples as well. And you know, it sets some fairly firm boundaries and rules in place, but by following them, people do pretty well, I'd say. And so,
mm,
you know, I think that there's this, yeah, within the kind of the liberal system, I think there's been too much excess generally, and you know, that excess has been it's been wild and in a number of different directions. So you know, promoting like heavy drinking, drug taking, engaging in sexual promiscuity, and also porn as well. And so you know, it like I'm seeing a lot of sins there, you know, and a lot of people are not going to be doing so well from, you know, engaging in all of these sins. And just as a way of bringing people back together, you know, I just feel that we've had this system in place for 2,000 years, and it's identified our faults pretty well, and where we go wrong, and you know, where we're unable to interact well with each other, and where we annoy each other, and where you know, we're prevented from forming strong relationships and strong communities. And so you know, I think when you concentrate on actually putting these rules in place, then I think people can do pretty well. And you know, that's in the Christian system, and I think it's in the other religious systems. And I would say that yeah, I kind of agree with your point. And you know, it's just that the feminized feminist society has come along with its own religion, and it, you know, it's just,
mm.
this is wildly destructive, horrible religion that's you know, is absolutely ruining people. And I kind of think we need just a better underlying structure, you know, and
Yeah,
that's the solution I'd suggest. So
yeah,
you know, the underlying structure that exists in the Bible, and
yeah,
you know, whether you believe in Jesus or not, it's just that you know, you see these rules and these principles, and you think, geez, if everyone followed them, then that,
mm,
you know, we'd all be doing quite well. And so yeah,
yeah,
so that's my
yeah,
kind of my point
yeah.
on that one.
Yeah, there's a good 5-minute clip of Brett Weinstein on YouTube somewhere, where he talks about how religion is literally false but metaphorically true if acting as though it's true um, makes you more able to live a fulfilled and effective and successful life. And it absolutely does. You know, I see anecdotally and you know, philosophically, that and from, you know, the sort of empirical evidence that faithful kind of communities are really successful.
Hmm.
And you know, that's great. But you know, I would still question whether some aspects of traditional kind of religious, or well, I hate saying traditional religious kind of, because it's like, well, which tradition? But you know, the kind of, say, Christianity, for example, I worry that
It's
some
a
of
good way of putting it into one sentence, isn't it? Or, you know, one phrase or something, and referring to the mass of
it
it.
is,
And
but you know, there are much older religions. There are much older religions than that, which is why
sure, yeah, yeah,
I don't like the word. But you know, I still question whether some of the excesses that you rightly point out as having been problematic in our sort of post-Enlightenment societies are responses to some of the not altogether necessary repression that's happened as a result of you know, the church, like, you know, the repression of homosexuality and stuff like that, you know. um and I also think that, I think I might have mentioned in our last conversation, but I just think that belief and faith is toothpaste that's out of the tube on a societal level, and kind of it ain't going back however much we want it to.
right,
And I
right.
also think that, you know, I know that you are uncommonly lucky to have a really great church and church community, but not every church is like that. You know, I
Yeah,
go to I try to go to church on a yearly basis to go and see the remembrance service,
yeah, yeah.
and you know, they are, so many of them are so regressively like left wing and, you know, infiltrated by feminists, and it's not, it doesn't offer me what's useful. And I think that a lot of churches, you know, I wouldn't suggest to anyone go down to your local church because it might give you something useful, because there's every possibility that going down to your local church will just be a grim experience.
I think generally, if it's church of affirmation rather than church of transformation, then it's a bad thing. So, a church of transformation is that the principle is we're all sinners, and you know, basically we're pretty hideous creatures. You know, there's like, if we believe in our own pride, we're going to go wrong, and it's only by reaching out to Jesus that we're able to do well. Whereas Church of Affirmation is like, oh, that's a bit of a strong message, you know, and generally we're all nice, and you know, everyone's okay, and we should be tolerant of everyone and everything, and then it kind of undermines the message, and so that's where I think you know, you go wrong with that one. And then you kind of go along to a Church of Affirmation place, and you're like, there's no real purpose to be in here, you know, like there's no real grit to this. It's not like a difficult journey or anything.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, so that I see that as being the main problem within the church, I'd say. And I mean, if I went to one of Church of Affirmation place, I wouldn't want to be there long, because you know, it's just boring and lame. And to be honest, that was my experience of Christianity in school as well. Was it was just really weak-willed and so on. And so I mean, it was great to return to it later on when I went to a church of actual believers, and kind of God-fearing believers, and it's like, okay, that this is something different, you know. And yeah. But
Yeah,
yeah, I agree with you. You need to go to a church of transformation. That's absolutely has
that's
to
the
be that.
key.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you know, where I definitely do agree with you is where you mentioned feminism as a new religion. And I think that there is a big question, um, because I do believe that human beings have a religious instinct. And so it's like, if the toothpaste is out of the tube and we're not going to be a Christian society, where are we going to direct that impulse usefully?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I would love for it to be directed towards philosophy. I think
Mm-hmm.
that there is space, for it to be kind of, for there to be an element of nationalism in there. So, we may not all be able to congregate around the cross, but we might be able to congregate around the Union flag, which I think, that would certainly be a step in the right direction from where we are now, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And, values like truth and freedom, that's what I'd love to see, but whether that's realistic, I don't know.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, I'm sort of, I think that's a pretty good movement. I do kind of think that you need a messiah or a meta hero, if you want to get Jordan Peterson-y. Like someone to follow whose struggle everyone, is following and everyone is geared towards. And yeah, it's good if that's not Laura Bates, and the Gospel of Laura Bates, where she goes to Messages for Men conference, and there's some horrible lewd men there, and she's only able to stay a few minutes or something, and then has to go off home. And yeah.
I think that I do think Christianity is really important, and I think that, as a foundation for our society, it's given us an awful lot, and I think that it's really important that people know the stories, whether or not they believe. And I mean, I have never believed. And when I was at school, I remember being really resentful that we sort of, our RE lessons were like God, 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 and our assemblies were like, Jesus, 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 and all this kind of stuff. But now I've grown up, and I'm really glad that I know those stories, because they do have really important, inspiring messages. And also, it is the basis of our collective morality, and so it's really useful to know where it's come from. And also, just on a very practical level, you can't read Shakespeare or listen to a politician without hearing references to the Bible, and if you don't know the stories, it's just over your head, and that's just sad. So I have put, and I do put effort into teaching my children the stories.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
And I think that, and I mean, to be fair, I only do that because I discovered that their schools are absolutely not doing it.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was something I'd have to do in Britain, but apparently I do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would really like to see a renaissance, at least in the knowledge and in the teaching of the stories, but whether that has to be coupled with a renaissance in the actual belief and
I mean, would you
observance?
Do you think that people might move towards more of a cultural version of it? Because I'm a full-on believer. But I can't expect everyone to just jump on board with that. If they're not full-on believers. I mean, but I don't know. I just think that the bits we're missing out on is the I mean, the bits that everyone really is missing out on right now, especially with the lockdown, is community. That's the, you know, just knowing the local people, you know, around you, and making sure that everyone's doing all right and is okay. And then, you know, I think the singing is fantastic as well.
Yeah.
I think that's so essential, that doing that activity with people from your local community. And then, you know, beyond that, there's also like the overall mission of it is to try and save everyone's soul. And so, I mean, I just say that's a strong statement, however you look at it, because, you know, you're going there to have your soul saved, and also to help other people, you know, ensure that that they're saved as well. And so that's an absolutely glorious mission. And so I think it's such a great bedrock there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. There's definitely meaning to be found there.
yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think we have aired quite badly. I think we both agree on that, but maybe just disagree on some of the, I don't know, some of the things that have gone wrong in society recently.
Yeah,
So
yeah, exactly. You know, I think we have some fairly subtle disagreements about what constitutes a problem in some areas. You know, and so yours is more based on religious doctrine, and, you know, there are things that you see as sinful and problematic that I see as fine.
Okay, sure.
And yeah, no, I think, but generally I think we're both going in the same direction. You know, and certainly the sort of cardinal sins I think we would agree on. And you know, also the kind of what we see as productive and healthy lifestyles for most people tallies, I think. But yeah,
and
then
I also found out a
with
bit about Lilith as well, so that was nice.
Yeah, we're just left with the question of how do we clean up this mess.
Fair enough. Yeah. I'll leave that for another time. But
Unresolved.
Yes. So Elizabeth, thank you for your time.
It's been a pleasure talking to you again.